My brother said it while pouring himself a third glass of scotch, the expensive kind. The kind he always brought to Christmas dinner and made sure everyone noticed. "You'll be begging us for money soon, Leah." He swirled the glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light from the Christmas tree. I mean, seriously, how long can you keep this up, this freelance thing? The economy's shifting. People like you are going to get crushed. He said people like you, the way someone says off-brand cereal, with casual, unthinking contempt. My name is Leah Whitfield. I'm 33 years old, and I was sitting in my parents' kitchen in Greenwich, Connecticut, peeling potatoes for Christmas dinner because that was my assigned role. Not sitting at the table with the adults discussing business. Not in the living room with my brother Derek and his partners celebrating their company's best quarter. In the kitchen, peeling potatoes. 24 family members filled the house. My parents, Thomas and Vivian Whitfield. Derek, golden child, CEO of a tech logistics company called Trackline Solutions that had just closed a $36 million Series B funding round. His wife, Morgan, who ran the company's marketing division and never let anyone forget it. My sister Claire, an attorney at a top firm in Manhattan. Uncle Peter and Aunt Susan. Assorted cousins, all in careers that could be summarized in 3 impressive words or fewer. And me, Leah, the freelancer, the one in the kitchen. What none of them knew, what I had protected with 7 years of meticulous anonymity, was that the freelance work they pitied was a cover for Whitfield Venture Partners, a private investment firm I'd built from nothing into a $2.1 billion operation, managing capital for institutional investors, family offices, and a carefully selected portfolio of growth-stage technology companies. And one of those technology companies was Derek's, Trackline Solutions. The Series B funding round Derek had been celebrating for the past 3 months, the one that valued his company at $120 million, the one that made him feel like the king of every room he entered, I was the lead investor. $22 million of the $36 million round came from my firm, channeled through a subsidiary called Granite Capital Holdings. Derek thought his biggest backer was a faceless institutional fund run by people in glass towers somewhere in Midtown Manhattan. He had no idea it was his sister, standing in their parents' kitchen with potato peel under her fingernails. But tonight, that was going to change. Because tonight, at approximately 8:15 p.m., Derek's lead investor was going to walk through the front door of this house. And she wasn't going to be carrying a briefcase. She was going to be carrying a pie. I need to explain. The person walking through that door wasn't me. It was my managing partner, Grace Nakamura, who also happened to be the public face of Granite Capital Holdings. Grace was the name Derek knew, the voice on the conference calls, the signature on the wire transfers. The person he believed ran the fund that had transformed his company from a struggling startup into a $120 million enterprise. What Derek didn't know was that Grace worked for me, that Granite Capital Holdings was a subsidiary of Whitfield Venture Partners, that every strategic decision, every funding allocation, every term sheet that shaped his company's trajectory had been authored by the sister he'd just told would be begging for money. Grace and I had planned this evening with the precision of a military operation. She would arrive at 8:15, ostensibly as a friend of the family visiting for the holidays. She would be introduced to Derek, who had never met his lead investor in person, only through video calls where Grace had been carefully framed against a neutral office background. The recognition would be immediate. And then the dominoes would fall. It was 7:42 p.m., 33 minutes. In the kitchen, my mother was arranging appetizers on a tray with the focused intensity of a woman who believed presentation was a form of love. She glanced at me peeling potatoes and sighed. "Leah, honey, you know Derek offered to get you a position at Trackline, even something administrative. It would be a foot in the door." "I appreciate that," I said, carefully peeling a russet potato. Administrative, at a company I was the majority funder of. The irony tasted better than the scotch Derek was drinking. Claire appeared in the doorway, her heels clicking on the tile. She was wearing the kind of dress that told you she'd come from somewhere important and was going somewhere more important after this. "Leah," she said, not unkindly, "Mom told me about the freelance thing. Are you doing okay? Financially?" "I'm fine," I said. "Fine," she repeated, the same way everyone in this family repeated that word when I said it, like it was a euphemism for drowning. "If you need anything," she added, "legal advice, a loan, whatever, I'm here." "Thank you, Claire. That means a lot." She squeezed my shoulder and returned to the living room, where Derek was holding court. The origin story of Whitfield Venture Partners doesn't start with a brilliant insight or a lucky break. It starts with $40,000 and a spreadsheet. After graduating from Columbia with a degree in economics, I spent 3 years as an analyst at a boutique investment firm in New York. I was exceptional at it. My portfolio recommendations outperformed the firm's senior partners by a factor of 2. I was on track for a promotion that would have put me on the fast track to partnership. Then, the firm was acquired by a larger company. Every analyst under 35 was offered a severance package and shown the door. The financial world's version of, "Thanks for your service, now leave." I took the $40,000 severance and did something nobody expected. Instead of finding another analyst job, I started my own firm. Not because I had a grand vision, because I was tired of making other people rich with my ideas while they took the credit. Whitfield Venture Partners began in a studio apartment with a laptop, a Bloomberg terminal subscription I couldn't really afford, and a conviction that I could identify undervalued opportunities better than anyone else in the market. My first investment was $15,000 in a pre-seed fintech startup that everyone else had passed on. 18 months later, that startup was acquired for $40 million. My return was $2.3 million. That single investment became my calling card. Word spread through investment circles about the anonymous fund that had identified the acquisition target 18 months early. More capital flowed in. More deals followed. By year 3, I was managing $200 million. By year 5, $800 million. By year 7, today, $2.1 billion. I'd built a team of 23 analysts, operated from a discreet office in Midtown that appeared on no directories, and maintained a client list that included sovereign wealth funds, university endowments, and several of the wealthiest families in America. And I'd maintained my anonymity with absolute discipline. Whitfield Venture Partners was known in the industry as the Ghost Fund. No founder profile, no conference appearances, no press interviews. The firm's reputation was built entirely on performance, and that performance spoke louder than any media appearance ever could. Derek's company entered my portfolio 3 years ago. Trackline Solutions was a logistics optimization platform with strong fundamentals but poor capitalization. Derek was a decent CEO with good instincts but limited access to the kind of patient, strategic capital his company needed to scale. I'd watched him struggle through seed rounds and angel investments that came with strings attached and investors who didn't understand the logistics space. So I invested, not because he was my brother, because the company was genuinely undervalued and the market opportunity was real. The fact that it was Derek's company was, from a pure investment standpoint, irrelevant. From a personal standpoint, it was the most complicated decision I'd ever made. Through Granite Capital Holdings, I'd invested a total of $22 million across 2 funding rounds. I'd shaped the company's growth strategy through advisory sessions conducted by Grace. I'd connected Derek with supply chain partners he never could have accessed on his own, and I'd watched from a distance as my brother used my money and my strategy to fuel the very confidence with which he looked down on me at every family gathering. Every time he bragged about his investors at dinner, he was bragging about me. Every time he toasted to Trackline's success, he was toasting to my judgment. And every time he told me I'd be begging for money, the money he was celebrating came from my fund. 7:55 p.m., 20 minutes. The kitchen was filling with steam from the roasting turkey. My mother was fussing over the table settings. My father had joined Derek in the living room, where the two of them were discussing Trackline's expansion plans with the enthusiasm of men who believed they understood business better than anyone in the adjacent room. "Our biggest investor is incredible," I heard Derek say through the doorway. "Granite Capital. They just get it. Strategic, patient, brilliant." Their managing partner, Grace, she's probably one of the smartest people in venture capital. I peeled another potato and said nothing. "You know," Derek continued, "I've never actually met Grace in person. Everything's been remote. But she mentioned she might stop by the area this holiday season. I invited her to come say hello if she was nearby." My hand paused on the potato. He'd invited her. I hadn't known that. Grace hadn't mentioned it. My phone buzzed. A text from Grace. "Slight change of plans. Your brother personally invited me to stop by tonight. I didn't tell him yes or no. Want me to still come at 8:15? I typed back, "Yes. But now it's even better. He invited his own revelation." She responded, "This is the most expensive Christmas party I've ever attended. $22 million in conversation starters." I finished the potatoes and washed my hands. 18 minutes. In the living room, Morgan was showing photos of their new BMW X7 to Aunt Susan. Claire was on her phone, probably billing hours from memory. My cousins were arguing about football. Derek was refilling his scotch, the third becoming the fourth, his confidence expanding with each pour. "Leah," my father called from the living room, "come sit with us. Derek's telling us about the expansion." I dried my hands and walked in. The living room was warm, lit by the tree and the fireplace. Derek sat in the largest chair naturally. Morgan perched on the arm beside him. My parents occupied the sofa. I took the small chair in the corner, the one that had been mine since childhood, the one nobody else ever sat in because it was uncomfortable and slightly too far from the center of conversation. Perfect metaphor. "We're looking at European markets next year," Derek was explaining. "Granite Capital is backing a $50 million growth round specifically for international expansion. Grace thinks we could triple revenue within 18 months. I nodded along. I'd written that projection. Grace had presented it. Derek believed it originated from a faceless institution. It originated from the woman in the corner chair peeling potatoes. "That's impressive," I said. He glanced at me with the particular condescension reserved for compliments from people he didn't respect professionally. Thanks, sis. Maybe someday you'll understand this world. 8:07 p.m. 8 minutes. My phone buzzed. Grace. Parking now. I'm wearing the red coat. I have pie. Apple. I typed. Perfect. Front door is unlocked. Just walk in like you belong. She replied, I manage $2.1 billion. I belong everywhere. I smiled at my phone. Derek noticed. Hot date? He asked, smirking. Something like that, I said. 8:14 p.m. 1 minute. The doorbell rang. I'll get it, I said, standing up before anyone else could move. I walked to the front door, opened it, and there was Grace Nakamura, 5'6", black hair pulled back sharply, wearing a red wool coat and holding an apple pie from the bakery in Midtown that charged $45 for a single pie because the apples were heritage varietals or something equally absurd. She looked at me with eyes that contained 7 years of shared secrecy and a very specific kind of anticipation. Ready? She murmured. Been ready for 7 years, I replied. I led her into the living room. Everyone, I said, this is my friend Grace. She was in the area and I invited her to stop by. Hope that's okay. My mother immediately switched to hostess mode. Of course, welcome. Can I get you something to drink? Grace smiled warmly. That would be lovely, thank you. She set the pie on the side table and began removing her coat. Derek stood up to greet her because Derek always stood up for new people. It was a dominance thing, dressed as manners. Hi, I'm Derek Whitfield, he said, extending his hand. Leah's brother. I run Trackline Solutions. Nice to meet you. Grace shook his hand. Her expression didn't change, but I saw the micro shift in her eyes, the moment before the moment. And what do you do, Grace? Derek asked, settling back into his chair with the ease of a man who assumed he was the most successful person in any room. I'm a managing partner at Granite Capital Holdings, Grace said. The room didn't react immediately. The name hadn't connected yet. It was just a job title at a holiday gathering. But Derek froze. His scotch glass stopped halfway to his lips, the same way recognition stops traffic. His brain was running the calculation at full speed. Granite Capital, Grace, managing partner, standing in his parents' living room, brought by his freelancer sister. Grace? He said, and the word came out cracked. As in, my Grace? Your lead investor, Grace? Grace smiled the smile of a woman who managed $2.1 billion in assets and had been waiting for this moment for 3 years. Hello, Derek. It's nice to finally meet you in person. Your sister has told me a lot about you. My sister. The 2 words hung in the air like a held breath. Every person in the room sensed the shift even if they didn't understand it yet. Morgan's hand tightened on the arm of the chair. My parents exchanged confused glances. Claire looked up from her phone. My sister told you about me, Derek repeated slowly. He looked at me, then at Grace, then at me again. She works with you? She doesn't work with me, Grace said. She paused, glancing at me for permission. I nodded. I work for her, Grace continued. Leah is the founder and CEO of Whitfield Venture Partners. Granite Capital Holdings is our subsidiary. She's your lead investor, Derek. She has been for 3 years. The silence that followed wasn't silence. It was the sound of a family's entire understanding of itself being reformatted in real time. Derek's scotch glass tilted. The liquid reached the rim, hesitated, and spilled onto his khakis. He didn't notice. He was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face. Not shock exactly, something deeper. The look of someone who's just discovered that the ground they've been standing on was built by the person they were looking down at. That's, he started. He couldn't finish. $22 million, I said quietly, across 2 funding rounds, through Granite Capital. I also structured your Series B terms, connected you with your supply chain partners in Southeast Asia, and designed the European expansion strategy that you've been presenting as Granite's recommendation. It's my recommendation. It's always been my recommendation. The room erupted, not in noise, in the absence of it. My mother sat down on the sofa arm, missing the actual cushion and sliding sideways before catching herself. My father's mouth opened and closed 3 times without producing language. Claire dropped her phone and didn't pick it up. Morgan made a sound like a balloon releasing air. Derek stood up. His khakis were wet with scotch. His face was cycling through colors I didn't know faces could produce. "You've been funding my company," he said. His voice was thin, almost translucent. "Yes, for 3 years. Yes, while I told you that you'd be begging for money. While you told me that, yes." Derek sat back down, missed the chair, caught himself on the armrest, and half collapsed into the seat. Grace stepped forward and placed a folder on the coffee table. "This is a summary of Whitfield Venture Partners' current portfolio," she said. $2.1 billion under management. Investments in 23 companies across 7 sectors. Trackline Solutions represents approximately 10% of our holdings. She opened the folder. Leah's personal net worth, based on her equity positions and management fees, is approximately $680 million. My mother made the sign of the cross. She hadn't done that since I was 12 and fell out of a tree. Derek was staring at the folder like it contained a live animal. $680 million, he whispered. "And you let me? You sat here and let me?" He couldn't finish. "Tell you I'd be begging for money," I said. "Yes." "Offer you administrative jobs?" "Yes." "Treat you like you were failing?" I took a breath. "Every single time. And every single time I went back to my office and managed the fund that was keeping your company alive." He put his head in his hands. "Oh God, the European expansion, the supply chain contracts, the term sheets, that was all you." "Not me directly," I said. "I have a team of 23 analysts. Grace runs Granite brilliantly. But the strategy, the capital allocation, the decision to invest in Trackline in the first place, yes, that was me." "Why?" Claire asked. She'd recovered her lawyer composure faster than anyone else. "Why invest in Derek's company?" "Because it was a good investment," I said simply. "The logistics space is growing 18% annually. Trackline's platform solves a genuine market problem. The unit economics were strong. I would have invested regardless of who the founder was." She studied me. "And the anonymity? Because the moment anyone in this family knew, 2 things would happen. Derek would stop listening to the strategic advice because he'd resent that it came from his sister. And this family would make my company about Derek's company instead of about the 22 other investments in my portfolio. Both of those things would have cost my investors money. And I don't lose money for my investors, not for family feelings, not for anything." My father found his voice. "Leah," he said, and his voice carried a weight I'd never heard from him before. "How long have you been doing this?" 7 years, I said, "since the severance package." He was quiet for a long time. "We told you to get another analyst job," he said. "You did," I confirmed. "And instead, I started a firm that now manages more capital than every job you suggested for me combined." Morgan, who had been silent through the entire revelation, spoke up. "The BMW," she said quietly. "The one we bought to celebrate the Series B." Derek looked at her. "She basically paid for it," Morgan said. Derek closed his eyes. The sound he made wasn't quite a word. It was the auditory equivalent of watching your entire self-image dissolve. Grace stepped back and stood beside me. The physical positioning wasn't lost on anyone. The managing partner deferring to the woman in the cardigan. The power standing next to the power behind the power. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone," I said. "I'm here because it was time. Because I'm tired of peeling potatoes in the kitchen while the people I fund celebrate in the living room. Because my investors deserve a founder who can operate publicly. And because you deserve to know the truth, even if the truth is uncomfortable." Derek stood up slowly, his scotch-stained khakis, his expensive watch, his entire presentation of success, all of it suddenly recontextualized. He walked toward me. I braced for anger. Instead, he hugged me. It was clumsy and tight, and he was shaking slightly, and he whispered something into my shoulder that only I could hear. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For every word." I hugged him back. "I know," I said, "and your company is still a good investment." He laughed. It was wet and broken and real. My mother came next. She cupped my face in her hands and looked at me like she was meeting me for the first time. "My little potato peeler," she said, and then she was crying and laughing, and I was too. My father shook my hand, formally, like a business meeting, then pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than any conversation we'd ever had. "I should have asked," he said, instead of suggesting. "I should have asked what you were building." "Yes," I said, "you should have. But you're learning now." Claire hugged me last. She held on for a long time. "You're the most impressive person I've ever met," she whispered. "And I argue cases in front of federal judges." I smiled. "Federal judges don't have to survive this family's Thanksgiving dinner." She laughed. Grace and I left together at 9:30 p.m. In the driveway, the December air was sharp and clean. She looked at me with an expression that carried 7 years of shared purpose. "How do you feel?" "Like I finally left the kitchen," I said. She handed me the car keys. "By the way, your brother's European expansion projection needs revision. The Southeast Asian supply chain costs are 12% higher than our models assumed." "I know," I said, starting the car. "I'll fix it Monday." "Some things don't change," she observed. "The biggest investor in the room still does the work herself." "That's why the fund performs," I said. "And that's why the potatoes were always perfectly peeled." The weeks that followed restructured everything. Derek and I had a 4-hour dinner the following week. Just us. No family audience, no performance. He asked questions he'd never asked before. Real ones, about my strategy, my team, my first year struggling alone in a studio apartment while he was raising Series A rounds with my money. "I've been the CEO of a company funded by someone I underestimated every day for 3 years," he said. "That's either the most humbling thing that's ever happened to me or the most embarrassing." "Both," I said. He smiled. "Both is right." Trackline's European expansion launched 4 months later, with revised projections. The Southeast Asian supply chain costs were, in fact, 12% higher than our models assumed. I fixed it. Revenue hit the targets I'd set, not Derek's optimistic ones. His company crossed $200 million in valuation by summer. My father started reading about venture capital, not casually, systematically. He called me every Sunday with questions. What's a convertible note? How do you calculate dilution? What makes a good term sheet? He was 71 years old, learning an entirely new field because his daughter had shown him there were worlds he'd never bothered to explore. My mother stopped assigning me kitchen duties. At the next family gathering, Easter, she gave me the large chair, Derek's chair. He didn't complain. He sat in the corner chair, the uncomfortable one, the one I'd occupied for 33 years. He said it felt right, like penance. Claire referred 3 of her firm's clients to Whitfield Venture Partners. All 3 became investors. She didn't ask for a finder's fee. She said watching Derek's face at Christmas was payment enough. 6 months after the reveal, Forbes ran a profile on Whitfield Venture Partners. The headline called it the most successful stealth fund in American history. The photo showed Grace and me standing in our Midtown office, surrounded by our team. I was wearing the same cardigan I'd worn to Christmas dinner. Grace was wearing her red coat. The article noted that our founder had spent 7 years building $2.1 billion in assets, while her family believed she was a struggling freelancer. It quoted Derek. He'd given the journalist a statement. My sister invested $22 million in my company, shaped its entire strategy, and saved it from failing twice. And I spent 3 years telling her she'd be begging for money. I don't know if that makes her the most patient person in the world or the most strategic. Probably both. I framed that quote. It hangs in my office next to the first investment memo I ever wrote, the one for the $15,000 fintech bet that started everything. Because the real story was never about the $2.1 billion. It was about the kitchen, about being assigned the potatoes while the people you funded celebrated in the next room, about building an empire so quietly that the people living inside it never thought to ask who built it. And it was about the moment you finally walk out of the kitchen, wipe the potato peel off your hands, and show them that the person they'd been overlooking was the person holding everything together. Sometimes the most powerful investor in the room is the one peeling potatoes. Sometimes the money everyone's celebrating came from the person nobody's impressed by. And sometimes the best investment you'll ever make isn't in a company or a fund or a market opportunity. It's in the patience to let the people who doubt you keep doubting until the truth walks through the front door carrying an apple pie.